Folks, welcome to Shallibodhran, and on this episode, as promised, I was going to show you the collection, and I also have some very good news. The doctor has finally given me the go-ahead to start playing again. For those who don't know or didn't follow, I tore 3 muscles, actually. It wasn't 1, it was 3. It was internal pectoral, part of the bicep had a small tear, and a good section actually went down the arm. So if I could draw a constellation outline of what happened, all of that went not numb, but lost a lot of its strength. So I'm actually back to having a half decent sort of feel to it. It still hurts quite a bit in through here, but I'm glad it's over. But let's get down to business. You wanted to see it, and I got enough requests to it, so I'm going to show you the entire collection. And before I do it, just to show you what I am going to be playing them with, a double-ended bundle tipper, single-ended bundle tipper, a very thin, my favorite tipper, my Lignum Vitae tipper for small stuff, and then for a more traditional sort of sound, a mallet and an oak. So to kick it off, I might as well start off with the first drum that I purchased that was good beyond the Waltons that I originally had, and that's the Hedvig Shack RWE. And the RWE, if you watched my old video of it, in a nutshell, is essentially a super Seamus O'Kane drum. It's a 16 by 6, and it has the basic set of tuners that were, pretty much on every Hedvig Shack drum at the time. And it runs a compressor ring instead. What the compressor ring does is that it tidies up a lot of the extra flap and allows a little bit more of a punch to come through. The material on the outside is a fiddle bottom maple sandwiched to umbrage ply, and the little skin is Lambeg. It's one of 2 drums that I actually have, which are Lambeg skin. I got it after much deliberation as to saying, what am I going to get? And I kept this. I've had this for quite a while now, since 2014, and I've kept it because it seems to balance out the most between doing exactly what a Seamus O'Kane drum normally does, which is lots of tone, as well as being fairly percussive as well, but really is a tone drum. And this is very much what I like with regards to tone drums. So if it's for soloing or if it's for capturing a particular set of sound, I find the RWE to be one of the most balanced drums out there. Not because it's revolutionary, but because it made that little jump into something that was more, it was built more reliably, it was built more to a different template standard. Not to talk smack about the SOK drums. Seamus's drums are a hell of a lot of fun to play, but I liked how it cleaned up the bottom end and made it a little more concise. So pitch bending was a little more exact. And it's hilarious. It's a great, fun drum to play. It's actually one of the main ones I'll use in most sessions because it's so versatile. It's nice. A lot of bass comes through. It's fairly simple. The bass doesn't feel like there's a ton of overtone, but it travels a long distance and it's clean. So miking it is one of the easiest drums to mic that I have, second only to the core line. This is what I usually will play for it. Yeah, it's cool. The only thing that I thought that maybe this drum could improve upon is the rim sound. If you do like playing rim shots, it's clacky. and it sounds very cold by comparison. And it cuts through nicely, but it's also a bit of an annoyance, especially when it's being mic'd. It typically kind of trips the treble too much, and I've never been able to clean it up. So I don't typically will do rim shots with this drum. But that's the RWE. It's an all-rounder for an all-rounder player. And if you have a Seamus O'Kane or have played Seamus's drums, this is something to definitely put it right up there. Because while it is way more expensive, especially now, the prices of them went up quite a bit. But for the sake of the next evolutionary step of a Seamus O'Kane drum, this is it. I think this sets the standard for what that is. Also, it looks like red velvet cake, and I love red velvet cake. Okay, number 2. In the same vein is my Metloff, which I actually have done some custom decorative work on it. It was all black. I bought it secondhand, so it was used. It was one of the best buys I ever had, and it has a different sort of sound. Number 1, it's a 4-inch frame. It's still a 6-inch diameter. But remember when I mentioned about the rim shot? That's the sound. It's very clean sounding. Nice and clean. Easy to mic, doesn't crack into the treble, and doesn't thonk too low in the bass so that you don't have to play with the EQ too much. And it has all the same general set. It's a really nice drum to play, actually, for the sake of just tone playing. It's actually one of the easier drums I find to play. It's certainly one of the more comfortable. 4-inch fits beautifully under my armpit. But what I like about it is the sound with a bundle tipper. What I really like about this, and it does it a little bit better than the RWE, though the RWE's tone overall is maybe a little bit nicer, is the percussive aspect of it. Any flat hits. It's a little boxier. And what that means is that it has a short-lived, less sustained sort of sound. It's definitely not as loud. It's definitely more boxy sounding, even on the open hits. And I can feel the vibration a little bit more. A lot of it is not being transferred out of the back, but it's being transferred all around it. So like the RWE, you can actually hear it completely around the drum. It's a little bit different. It's, again, a 16, but it has the Faulkner tuners. The Faulkner Bartlett tuners. And this drum is interesting because every section, and I don't know, maybe just through dumb luck, but every section, the skin's a little bit different. So the section up here that I have all marked out in the pink is actually the second hardest section, but it opens up to a very open, smooth section. The top of it here is harder, which is nice if you're not playing bass, but if you're playing something like little steps in the background where maybe a guitar is taking over the majority of the rhythm, and you can just hear it, just little hits. I like that very much. But what I like the most of it is the pop section, and typically I play it with that semi-hard section facing forward so I can ricochet off of it. There we go. But it's that boxy, square sounding on the top. Now that's not the RWE. The RWE is a very sharp sound compared to this. Also has very nicely at the bottom. It's got a good flat dead sound. It's a great drum to play in small groups because it's both loud or quiet. It doesn't take too much effort to be either or, and I can contour the sound loud and quiet better than I can contour it on the RWE. That's why I kept it in session playing, especially in small sessions, when playing with maybe 2 other people. This is one of my favorite ones to actually play. Very, very versatile. Basically, it's a boxier, more, while less controllable than the RWE, it's a boxier, harder, and more percussive version of it. And I'm a lover of that pink stripe. I actually think it's really cool. And then the tacks that I added are just, happen to be neon colored, and I thought they looked pretty snazzy with the drum. Yeah, it's cool. It also shows that you don't have to spend a lot of money to get it, even if it is a Metloff. So, especially if you're waiting on a Metloff and you're not too keen on waiting that long, there are used ones out there. Maybe you should look for them. Next one up. The last purchase I'm making in the BODHRAN world is this. It's a Belgarth. Belgarths are no longer in production. Sadly, and Leonard doesn't make them anymore. It's pretty much retired from it. They come from the Orkneys. This is a 5-inch, which is the most comfortable for me, but it's a 17.5-inch drum, oddly enough, with a 1-inch removal space. So really you're playing 17, thereabouts, 16 3/4. But what I like about it is that the skin isn't hard like the TR heads or whatever. It actually has a very, very soft internal feel. The tuners are Allen key. And I believe Ian's wife, or is it Owen? Ian? The spelling always throws me, so my apologies if I am pronouncing his name incorrectly. It's Owen or Ian, I can't quite remember. Is that she does a lot of the artwork and the painting on the drums, or did. So it's too bad you don't get to see that around anymore. So pick one up when you can. I like them because they're a lot like, a little bit like Shallibodhran drums. They're a lot like the CBS series from Hedvigschacht, except they don't cost nearly as much. Hear that? A completely different sound. It's almost like the bottom's there and the top's sort of squished down, and then there's a big empty trough in the middle when playing a mallet. That's why I like it. It's the best drum I have for pure percussive sound. But it is loud. It is not the easiest drum to control. But when you do, you reap the rewards of a very sensitive skin. Lot of big open area, and while it is a larger body drum, the bass line is easier to follow with less effort, and that reason is here. That's where the rim is, but that's where the playing surface begins, where it's properly the head of the drum. What it's not the best for are rim shots. And the big reason being is that that design takes away a lot of your control over the rim. So instead of hitting just there, you're hitting way more like this. And that's very uncomfortable and very hard to control. It's almost like you're skipping. But for the sake of what it is, it's very warm. It's very controllable. And what's nice about it, and this is just my personal liking, is that it's warm, boxy, and baritone. I like that very, very much. The top end playing on this is more difficult because you're normally up here, and if you do that, you lose it completely. So this is certainly not a drum for the most top-endy players, but it's nice fusion-wise. It has all the bellow of an 18, but with more of the control of a 16. You know, I guess that's kind of, you know, duh. Of course, it's a 17 in a bit, but it's, again, the secret and the detriment to the design is in that spacing between frame and the head. The skin itself is really, really neat. It's going to take quite a while. I haven't quite broken it in yet. It's going to take the rest of the year to break it in. But it's absolutely beautiful. And I picked it up, again, used, and it's got nice little guitar straps on it. Guitar strap locks. That's the Belgarth. Smaller body. Shawnee McGrath. And this is my other Lambeg, by the way, but it's a thin skin. Not the most, well, medium to thin skin. It's not the most percussive, even though it is fairly percussive. You know, and that's sort of a thing. You know, the benefit of this in session playing is that you have beautiful control. And oddly enough, I don't use it enough. Last year, I didn't use it all that much. I used it more as a teaching drum, because it's supremely lightweight. It weighs about as much as my kneecap. It's very small. It's a 14 by 6. And it is just supremely light. You know, compared to my core line, I actually find this a little bit more comfortable for two big reasons. Number one, the weight of the thing. But number two, and more importantly, inside, there is a completely huge area for your hands to move freely on the inside. Also helpful on this drum is this. All of this crescent of thinner skin, and then this section which deadens the sound. So if need be, especially when playing in smaller session, that's the reason why. It has that sense of, I can play with the idiosyncrasies of the skin more often and easier. When it comes to idiosyncrasies, this is the easiest drum to play because it is responsive, loud, it cracks, it's got a high end to it, but also it has a throaty deepness to it, which I have cleaned up a little bit by simply over taping it a little bit more. So, like that. The core line follows it up. This is the drum I mainly use for recording. Plain and simply, it's easy, it's moderate, and it's got a soft sound. It has the easiest in and out press for the bass line. It is the most delicate of all the drums that I have. Two big warnings if you are looking to buy the little Coreline Bullet from Hedvig Shack. Number one, it's not the most comfortable drum to play, but if you're someone who's under, say, 5'5", and you want something deep and throaty but not too loud, and you want something precise, that is what this is for. For me, this was the first drum I played that was small, a 14-inch by 6, and it is, without a doubt, the most responsive drum I have because of simply the size and the tension on the skin. Where this drum falls down is that in bigger groups and bigger sessions, it's just not loud enough. But part of that's just due to the physics of having a smaller drum in general. Shawnee McGrath drum, however, is not. It is loud by comparison, but harder to control. This is without a doubt the most controllable. Warning number 2, hard, heavy-handed people playing Corelines are going to break the skin. I've already chatted with 2 people. One of them, a giant of a man, another one who's basically the spitting image of myself, except just happens to be, weighs about, again, like 110-pound, very skinny guy, but with a great big press on his left arm. And they have both popped the head from pressing too hard on the inside, trying to get too much like that. Don't press hard on Coreline drums, especially the bullets. You get so much response so quick, you risk tearing the head. And when you do, you feel this. And then the head just flops. Now you can tighten it. Thankfully, the tear on one of them had to be replaced. Now it has a different skin on it, which has changed the world of that playing. But the other one, my skinny friend, just happens to have a simpler take, is that it tore the head and caught. So we can just tune it up a little bit more. Also, if you live in a humid climate, the tuners aren't enough. I put spacers in here just so I could make sure that the drum has the ability to give an extra, like, 1/8 of an inch to make up for the humidity difference in my province. But it's a lovely drum. Not the most comfortable, but it is the easiest one for me personally to play. If you're a top-end player and you like to really catch on the rim, it's a harder drum to play simply because it's smaller. That gives your hand a lot less room to press up. And because of the profile of the comfort tuning ring, it does not have the ability to quite crack. So if you're looking for cracking sounds, the Coreline is not going to be your drum. But if you're looking in for a Coreline, get the universal. That's the one to go for to get a more cracking sort of sound. Next up, Finnegan Hill. And this is the least decorated of all of them. It has a little bit of idiosyncrasy on a kangaroo skin, medium to medium-ish. Kangaroo is unique because it's probably the strongest skin out there for its thickness. So very thin drums are very, very hard. And they are quite bassy. They're quite elastic once you break the skin in, which usually takes about 8 months to, I would probably say, 1.5 years. And then what you get is this real rich bassy tone, and again, depending how you tune it, but I also find that it has a little bit of a scratch sound to it, which gives the drum's sound profile almost, even if you're playing tonal, it almost has a percussive sound to it. Quick stats on this guy, it is a 15-inch by 5-inch. And this was made to my measure at Finnegan Hill. And pretty much like everything at Finnegan Hill, it's like Matloff. It's one of those, everything's sort of a la carte. So every drum is unique and customizable. What I really like about this is that this weighs about as much as the Shawnee McGrath drum. It's a little bit bigger, so I'm able to play tonal aspects on it. It's a smaller medium body size so that it takes very little effort to get a walking bass. And most importantly, it's orange. And I absolutely love the color orange. So this is sort of the drum that I use the most for playing most sessions. And plain and simply, it's easy to control. It's to my specs. The skin allows me to hit and accompany in the ways that I wish to accompany. So while not the most percussive drum, it's not the most percussive drum, but it was ideally being made to play two tippers. This one and that one. Mainly for this sound. Nice and simple. And for the sake of it being a smaller body drum with, again, tons of room on the interior. And actually, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, that tiny little bevel in, I can literally put the whole of my finger right up and into it, which allows cracking that high. No drum I have has a crack on the top end player's side to get pops that high. It just doesn't. And I haven't quite figured it out because the measurements are almost identical to the Metloff, but the Metloff doesn't do it. And I think it has to be down to the skin thickness. The Metloff is a thicker skin drum and go. It's less pliable. At the same tensioning and same sort of, if I set these things up to the same tuning, this is still the more flexible instrument. It's still bassier, but it's less boxy and less percussive. This is more of a tonal drum. This is literally the drum I wanted designed so that I could get that John Joe Kelly sound, but not with all of the John Joe Kelly sound. I liked some of what I had developed and put it into this. So that's plain and simply, this is my number one. It also has the perfect rim for rim shots. It's not cracky loud. It's not going to set off the treble, and it's not bassy. It's just a flat twack sort of sound somewhere in the middle, which means miking this drum is easy, and miking it for the style that I prefer to play in, which I guess you could maybe call it similar to a John Joe Kelly sound, but with a little more scratch to it. This is about as good as I can imagine. So this is, again, Finnegan Hill. It's one of those, it's a company sort of similar to Metloff where it's a la carte. And it's orange, and you can't beat an orange drum. By the way, I'm not pulling Northern Ireland Protestant Catholic thing. I'm just, I love the color orange. Okay, the biggest drum I have, well, technically it's the second biggest drum I have. The 20-inch, however, is not played. It's just too big for me to play, and is currently actually being borrowed by a student of mine. The TR head by Hedvig Shack, and this is a custom one. I got this used for $500 Canadian, including the case, which is a hard flight case. Like, it's really nice with a beautiful sort of butterscotch fur interior. This is an amazing drum. It is 18 by 6, so it is a monster big drum to play. The skin is very, very hard. It has a thin coating. There you go. See it flash? A thin coating similar to a taping coating, which is designed to control some of the overtones. However, this drum does not control overtones all that much, which means I needed to develop some sticks of my own to play for it. This is what I use for a bundle tipper. It's a short-ended, meant for double-ended playing, and it was meant to produce this sound. Now, Hedvig Shack says the model was brought on a lot by the influence of Shallibodhran, and I can see why. And it follows Johnny Ringo's specific setups of designs, and one of it being putting the spine here, sort of at 4/5 of the drum. This is interesting because when I first started playing, I thought this was going to be the easiest way to play. What I actually find is that the drum skin is so thick, and it's such a big drum in general. And again, with tons of internal space, like you were running a country mile on the inside of this thing. You are instead, I actually find that's the easiest way to play for myself. For two reasons. I have the bass here to bong the sound out, but I also have a different feel here to strike. It's more controllable. I guess there's something to do with the skin line, or the spine line being there. And the second thing being is that it allows me to borrow a little bit from Cole Murphy, and that sort of playing in and out. That sort of feel. And I don't follow Cole too much, but I did do a video on some of his stuff. It was fun trying to learn it. I find it a very difficult way of playing when you're playing way up here. I'm way back here. I prefer Johnny Ringo's method. Hedvig describes this drum sound as sort of a Borden sort of sound, which is like similar bell-tony, a lot of overtones, and even though it has a coating here, it's got a lot of overtones. It is a loud drum. It is not easy. I am always struggling a little bit with this drum, but it is one of the drums I always take to a loud session. I'll normally take this drum for a harder sort of percussive sound, and that's what it's for. It's for percussion. And then I'll take a smaller bodied drum, maybe like the Finnegan Hill or the Sean McGrath one, to bring as a tonal drum. So this is the balance against that. I use this drum actually a lot. However, lately, because of recording stuff, it has been less used. This is more or less strictly used for live trad playing. It is beautiful. It doesn't have that sort of standard birch to it. It actually is a sandwich of olive and pearwood. If you are someone who likes to play John Joe Kelly-like stuff, this is not the drum for you. It certainly will never be the drum for you. It looks fantastic. It looks like someone poured a cappuccino with a foamy top. It is beautiful. It is actually a lot lighter. My core line is a lot heavier compared to this. I can easily just whip this around with my wrist. But it is loud. It is a hard drum to play, and it is not, I repeat, not a drum for beginners. But it is absolutely fantastic to play. I think this is about as close to a Charlie Byrne as that you can buy now. But the reason why I'll put it this way, it lacks sensitivity to a tonal player. If you're someone who's more percussive sort of sounding, it is excellent, especially when played outside. But if you're someone who is a more tonal sort of player, that is not going to be the case. Lastly, the number one drum I play for outside play, and that is the very rugged, simplistic, and I underline the word simplistic here being a good thing, because a lot of engineering can actually go into a very simple design. And sometimes engineering can over-engineer sound out of a drum. Sometimes you just want something really simple. And this is basically very similar to something that you would, an untaped head, it's a 16x4, just like the Metloff, medium thick skin. And this is a bit of a chemically treated skin, but there is a huge benefit to that treatment. Outside, this drum does not like to retune itself in humidity. It has the ability to resist humidity more, especially now since the skin is played in. And this drum has two amazing party pieces, and it's another reason why I've kept it. Number one, it's incredibly light and incredibly strong. It's probably got the most lamination to it compared to the rest. That's a lot of internal strength. And the other thing is that the tone ring on it is actually quite wide and is also heavily laminated. It's all Canadian hardwood maple, which means its compression rate and its ability to withstand against pressure is probably stronger than everything else there. Now, thankfully, this is not an instrument of high tension, but there's a pretty crazy picture that I believe Bridget Drums put out there, and that's what it is. It's a Bridget drum, made in Ontario, Berks Falls. And it's a picture of him standing on one of his drums, balanced on it. That says a lot, considering, like, we're talking like 170 some odd pound man standing on it, balanced. You know, that's just funny, number one. And number two, that tells you something about the strength of the frame. Why do I like this drum so much, especially for playing? And I really don't bring it to sessions a lot, but I use it for other things, like African music, Japanese music, Middle Eastern music, but mostly for African, because it for me captures that sort of Ronan O'Snoody sort of sound. And while I don't have my long stick here to sort of copy Ronan O'Snoody, it has its beautiful parting piece of actually being warm and creamy when played with a mallet. Especially if you tune it down. I've got it tuned a little bit high. And it has the ability to be cracking with a very square sort of sound to it. I like this drum very much because it is very balanced. The skin is equally homogeneous except for the spine line down the center, which is pretty normal, like on a lot of drums, whether they're inexpensive or not. But it's the treatment on the skin, its ability, especially in Canada and Ontario, where we're the king province for humidity, especially in the summertime where it's hot and humid, this thing can resist it, even next to a body of water. So I find that this is a beautiful, solid thing to play outside, to be heard, but also have that sensitivity, oddly enough, very similar to the McGrath drum and the RWE, of having minimal effort to get maximum results. It's also the only drum I see here which has really cool decorative binding. You know, like that's really neat. You know, I don't know where he gets it from. And it's just, again, a very simple, it's an Allen key tuning system, though Bridget Drums now, I believe, uses 3 tuning systems. It uses the standard Allen, the hand tensioner thumb screws, standard thumb screws, like pretty much everyone else's now, but also has a cam crank, and I believe it works by simply going crank, 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 loosen, 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 crank, crank, tighten. And you can literally do it with one thumb. So if you're someone who maybe has an injury in their hand and tuning is a bit of an annoyance for this sort of motion, especially those of you who suffer from carpal, this is easy because you're not putting very much strain on the carpal section in your arm and your hand. You know, so that is the set of the herd. You know, all of them. Grand total is 8 BODHRANs that I play. How often do I actually play all of them? Not as much as I used to because of life and being employed and working 50 hours a week. But to give you 3 answers to common questions. What are the top 3 drums I play in most sessions? The Finnegan Hill, the TR Head, and the RWE. Those are the main 3. If I'm playing outside, it's the Bridget as number 1. Number 2 is the Bell Garth. Number 3 is the Shawnee McGrath drum. What drum that I most play for in studio playing? Number 1 is the Coraline Bullet. Number 2 is the Finnegan Hill. Number 3 is actually the Metloff. Okay, so those are the big 3. If I had to, and this was cool because I got sent like 20 emails about this, if I had to give up all of them except for 3, which ones would I keep? Well, because I'm going to focus on my style of playing, it's the Finnegan Hill, absolutely. It's going to be the Bell Garth, because it crisscrosses the line between tonal and percussive. And then the third one is probably going to be the RWE, just because it's oh so versatile. That's the tone set and the playing set that I typically will use the most. So I'm going to give one more week, even though I have the clearance from the doctor to play again. I'm going to give one more week for my arm before I go back to session playing. But now I'm glad I finally got around to doing this. It's been a long time since I put a video out. Hopefully next week I will have another video lesson out It's going to be about rim shot playing. So until next time, have a good day. And hey, summer's here. Get out there and play. Go out and enjoy yourself. Have a good one.